Hey folks, it's Gregory here with Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings in Austin, Texas, and we've got some really neat things to look at today. I want to talk about the Breton style of furniture. That's absolutely one of my favorites, the way they tell stories in their carvings. I want to talk about some glass wine bottles and carboy, where that gets its name and what it was used for, and what else? I want to go through some of the history of the cane chair, but for now, let's start off with this incredible piece of furniture behind me. Let's just go ahead and zoom in on some of these carvings. One of my favorite things about the Breton style is the carvings. And you'll notice we get up here to these round spindles. That's a common motif for Breton style furniture. The Bretons were a seafaring people, and that represents the ship's steering wheel. In fact, when the Romans under Julius Caesar conquered the region that we now know as Brittany in 58 BC, they called it Armorica, which meant coastal region. Got the church in the background there. In Celtic, which incidentally, Brittany is one of the 6 Celtic regions recognized today, and we'll talk about that a little more in a second. But you can see some of the fantastic carving. Every day are scenes of common people. Let's take a look at the drawers. Now, I did look at these earlier. They do appear to be hand-cut dovetails, and we've got some square nuts here. If we go around to the back, we don't see any champering. It's flat right there. That puts the construction at a little bit later. So probably very late 19th into the early 20th century, but it's an absolutely beautiful piece. Now let's move on over here and we'll take a look at a few other things, and then I want to go into the room next door and we'll take a look at some more Breton pieces. So before we do that, I do want to point out this set of chairs. You see those? There's 14 of them. Okay, let's take just a few seconds to talk about these caned chairs. Interesting thing about that, the caning is an influence from the Far East, I believe India, and there are 14 of these chairs in this set. 2 of them are armchairs, but they're a little hard to get to, so we'll just take a look at these 2. And what you can see here is a motif that was quite common around the 3rd quarter of the 17th century, when the monarchy was restored to Charles II after Cromwellian rule, and you had a lot of this caned furniture being produced because they needed to replace a lot of furniture after the Great Fire of London in the 1660s. So a little bit of trivia about caning. Now, those chairs are not 17th century chairs. Nonetheless, they did copy the motif. Before we go into the other room, I want to take a look at this beautiful Breton hall bench. And there is a perfect example of the circular motif with spindles in it. It represents a ship's steering wheel. Since we're talking about ship's wheels, I thought it might be useful to show you some real life examples. Now obviously I don't have any reason to believe those are Breton, but nonetheless you can really see where that motif comes from that they use in the furniture. All right, now let's go right over here and take a quick look at something that I wanted to look at last time, but we didn't get to it because I forgot about it. And that is this incredible polychrome architectural element. Now that is a little over 100 inches long, and as best I can tell, it's 18th century. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's a little key that you can open up that door with, and I do think it was quite possibly in a church, because each one of those little niches there with the blue backgrounds could have held a Santos or a carved figure of some kind. Just a fantastic piece. And when I say polychrome, really all that means is many colors, multiple colors. Fantastic ecclesiastical architectural piece. All right, now that we've seen the architectural piece, I'm going to snap my fingers and we're going to appear in the room next door so we can look at some more Breton pieces. And voila, here we are. Okay, let's carry on with our examination of these Breton pieces. Here you can see a nice example of a Breton server. You've got the ship's wheel motif right here. Just a really nice piece. If we come around to the back, you'll notice once again in between the styles, the backboards are flat, they're not chamfered. Take a look at the dovetails there. Now here we have an older piece, and it's darker, probably chestnut. They used a lot of chestnut and some oak, but if we look around here on the back side of this piece, you can see that the panels in between the styles are chamfered. That indicates to me that this might be a little bit older than the other two we looked at. Now it's kind of crowded in here, but this is an example of a Breton table. You can see right there. There's a stairway there. Looks like it's going to a bed. But let's get back to the history of the Bretons for a moment. They managed to become and remain independent from the Roman Empire until, I believe it was 1488. They did have some alliances with Vikings along the way, I believe in an attempt to keep their independence, but finally became part of France in the 15th century. Now they do have their own language. It's a language that's Celtic in nature, similar to what you might find in Cornwall or Wales. Aren't those beautiful bottles? Those are vintage French wine bottles. And green is the standard color for French wine bottles for a very specific reason. It helps to prevent oxidation from exposure to the sun. And often, and I don't know much about wine production, but apparently some wines take decades to ferment, I guess, if that's the right word. And the longer you need for a wine to mature, the darker you need the wine bottles to be. That's my understanding, but I just like them because they're green. Here's an example of a carboy, which also is made from green glass. A little lighter shade perhaps than we saw with the wine bottles. And if you've ever wondered where the term carboy came from, It was from a Middle Eastern word, or an Arabic word perhaps, called karabah, and that eventually morphed into carboy. This one would probably be an early 20th century example, used to transport fluids such as water, wine, liquor, etc. Originally, I think the definition for it was a vessel for transporting potable water. All right, my friends, well, that's it for today's vlog. I hope you've enjoyed it. Maybe learned a little bit about Breton furniture and the region of Brittany in France. And please take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I am working on a video for the other YouTube channel, Antique Acquisitions, about trends in antiques. What's hot, what's not, what's happening with prices, things like that. So I hope that you will keep an eye out for that video. And with that, I will leave you with some footage of us unloading some new inventory items last night. We'll see you next time.